Hi everybody, hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to show you how to service a bike headset. This is some routine maintenance that I do every month or so, just because during the summer I put my bike through a lot of stuff and I end up washing it pretty often to get all the dust and dirt off. And by doing that, water gets into all the little gaps in my frame and headset. So I'm going to show you today how to service that and reapply the grease and clean it all out. In order to service your headset, you're going to need a couple of things. First and foremost, you're going to want a bunch of paper towels. This is in order to wipe the grease off of the bearings and the frame, and also to put your spacers and top cap on and stuff like that. Second, you're going to want a torque wrench, because if you have a modern mountain bike, there are torque settings for your stem and your handlebars. I don't think we're going to be messing much with the handlebars today. I think we should be able to just take the stem off, but it's a good idea to have these because there are specific torque settings. Next, what you want is some degreaser. This is optional. I like to use it just to get rid of the old grease, and I'll show you how to use this correctly. The last main item is grease, which this stuff is what I use on my bike, on all the parts of my bike. It's just this gooey stuff. Park Tool sells it. You can get it at any bike shop. And to go along with that, also a brush to apply it with. Before we get started on the maintenance part of things, I just want to give a quick run through on all the parts I'm going to be talking about today. First, here is the top cap. This is responsible for holding everything together in the headset, because there's a bolt that screws down into the fork and pulls everything up when you tighten it down. Next are the spacers. These allow the rider to move the stem up and down and adjust how high the handlebars are up on the bike. This is your stem, and these are your stem pinch bolts. This is what keeps the stem in place and allows you to actually turn the bike. It grips the fork. Next is, this is called the dust cap, and under the dust cap are the bearings, and as the name implies, this keeps out the worst of the dirt. When you go down further, this is the fork, and this is where the wheel connects, and that's all we're going to need to know for today. In a future video, I might go into more detail on some of these parts. Alright, now to the maintenance part. Step 1 is going to be to loosen up the top cap bolt. Now the top cap and the spacers will lift off. And just go ahead and set those off to the side on the paper towel on your work table. A quick tip, whenever you're disassembling something on a bike, it usually helps me a lot to take it apart and set it out in the order that the parts come off, just to avoid confusion whenever you're trying to reinstall stuff. Now, I have to swap out my bit on my torque wrench, and now this is where problems can arise if you don't do stuff correctly. But what you can do to avoid those problems is the main one I'm worried about is the fork. When I loosen these stem bolts, there's nothing that's going to be holding the fork in place anymore. So it's going to drop out, and that would be bad because I have a hydraulic lockout here and my brakes down there, which are connected to my handlebars, and I really don't want to rip those out because then hydraulic fluid would go everywhere and I'd have to take it to a shop to get it repaired. So I really don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is hold the fork and just begin to loosen these pinch bolts on here. You don't have to loosen too much, but just enough to allow the stem to slide off. You can already see the fork is ready to slide out. All right. Probably should have taken the front wheel off first. Alright, so now we have the fork out of the way. I'm going to start disassembling the bearings inside the headset. So On top, we have the sealed bearing cartridge, and inside that, we have a compression ring, and all that sits in the top cup here on the frame. Next, in the bottom, is a larger sealed bearing. Next, what you want to do is get a paper towel with a little bit of degreaser on it. Doesn't have to be much because this stuff is super powerful, and use it to just wipe out the cups on the frame and get all the grease out. And then go around another couple times, just make sure there's no more grease or degreaser left in there. And then repeat the procedure for the bottom cup in the frame. That's actually quite a bit of dirt in there. Now what I'm going to do is clean off all the individual parts. So I'm going to start with the top cap and the spacers. So I'm just going to take another piece of paper towel and just try to get the worst of the gunk off of it and try not to drop it. So after I get all the grease and grime off of it, I'm just going to do the same for each of the spacers. The spacers and top cap usually don't have too much grease on them, but I do like to just clean them off slightly, just to make sure that there's no remnants of stuff on there. The reason that they usually don't have grease on them is because most of the grease is located in the bearings, and these are separated from the bearings by the dust cap and the stem. After these are all clean, move on to this bolt. And try to get most of the grease off of there. We're going to re-grease all this. We're going to re-grease the bolt and then all of this stuff as well. Next, let's do the compression ring. And then we can move on to the bearings. As you can probably see, these bearings still have a... Hold on, let me focus it. There. You see the blue tinge right here. That means there's a pretty good layer of grease on there. That's dirt. False alarm. Phew. But that is also a good indicator of why this needs to be done every month, is just to get all the dirt and gunk out of there, because if mud sits in there, there's water and dirt sitting in there grinding away at the outside of this. The nice thing about sealed bearings is, since they are sealed with a rubber gasket, they are contained inside of here, so there's a lot less chance of grit getting in there, and so they have a bit of a longer lifespan inside your bike. Now that we have everything clean and ready to be reassembled, we're going to re-grease everything. So I'm going to start with the cups on the frame, and I'm going to use the brush and take a little bit of grease and just get it all around the inside of that cup. It's okay if a little bit gets on the frame, because it gets on the outside of the frame, because we're going to wipe it all off once we're done. At least wipe off the excess. You really want to make sure you get all this, because in addition to lubricating everything inside of here, this grease is going to keep out any kind of water, or at least do provide an extra layer of protection against water and grit inside of the cup. So when you're riding through a stream, or if you're just hosing your bike off, it's going to be a great barrier to keep out water and grime that could potentially affect the performance of your headset. So now just wipe off all the excess stuff and repeat the process for the bottom cup on your frame. So first, take your fork. Gotta untie mine real quick, I hung it up. keep it out of the way. Take your fork and the larger bearing and slide that bearing down right there. So it fits snugly right there. So now what you want to do is take the top bearing, this guy, drop it back in, and just make sure it's sitting all the way in there, and then put the compression ring in. The compression ring will slide up when you put the fork back in, but that's not a huge deal because we can adjust that later. So get the handlebars up out of the way and slide this up through. So you see how that's the compression ring is popping up and out, and so is the bearing, and that's totally fine because you can just sort of hold it in place as you get the bottom bearing settled into the frame like that, and you'll feel how tight the compression ring fits in there. And then you can just drop the stem back on. Oh, nope, hold on. Forgot the dust cap. Drop the dust cap on. This will cover the compression ring. And the bearings. Pop right back in, and that snaps right back down on top. And then what you can do just to temporarily hold it in place, if you are like me and you did not plan ahead and you left all the top cap and spacers on your workbench, just tighten that top one and it'll hold everything in there. And then you can grab the spacers and your top cap and the bolt. Drop the spacers on. And settle the top cap in. One thing I did forget to do was grease up this bolt, but just put a really light coating of grease on there. Oh, come on, focus. There. And that's just to keep water out of there. And then you can drop that back down and screw it in, give it a couple turns. And then get your torque wrench and tighten it down to about hand tight, to right about there. And then on the top it's going to have a torque reading, which mine is 4 Newton meters, so set your torque wrench to that. And then since I tightened up my stem bolt, I'm going to release the tension on that. And this is going to allow everything, this is going to take this is going to allow the stem to move around, so we can compress everything inside the headset. We have 4 Newton meters, so go ahead and tighten this down. You can hear that clicking noise. That means that you're at the torque setting that you have set. So that's 4 Newton meters. Now, make sure your handlebars are pretty straight. Go ahead and tighten up the stem pinch bolts. And as with the top cap bolt, I prefer to tighten these down about hand tight and then finish it off with the torque wrench. Clickety click, and excellent. And that is how you service a headset. Thanks for watching, everybody. I know this is not a riding video, but rest assured I will be putting out more of those videos soon. Got a couple fun ideas for some trail videos coming up soon, so stay tuned. See ya.